Hi, it's me, Brooks. Welcome to Heal This. Today, I'm really excited to share this story with you. It's Paul Doughty. He is a speaker, an author, and a TV series creator. And I want to share with you his story about overcoming some of the trials, whether they're physical or just being born into a certain family or having energetic blocks, and the way he overcame that. And he is the true story of resilience. And he wants to share that with you through sharing his speaking and his story and the ways that he did that and that you can do that too. And so, welcome. Hi, Paul.
Hello, Brooks, and your audience. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story and perhaps have the opportunity to help others out there that are experiencing perhaps something similar.
Awesome. Well, where should we begin?
I guess it makes sense probably to start from the beginning because that's
Yeah.
where the problems really started. I was young. I grew up in Pittsburgh, a suburb, a small house with my parents and my two older sisters. And from the outside, it looked like the perfect family. My father was well engraved in the community as a coach. My mother was a dance teacher and a choreographer, and my sisters were baton twirlers who traveled competitively. I
Wow.
was just 4 or 5 years old at this time, and what occurred is, as you mentioned, I had some trials and turbulations. I grew up in a house of domestic violence, and when I was 5 years old, I heard an argument, and my parents were in the kitchen with my uncle, and it was a small kitchen. When you first walked in, it had one of those rotary phones. It had a 20-foot cord tied in about 20 knots that you could stretch halfway across the house, and it was a small table that overlooked the sun porch, an open window to the sun porch, and my father was sitting at one side of the table and my uncle was sitting at the other side of the table, and I heard an argument. And when I peeked around the corner, I saw my father pick up a half-gallon glass milk jug and swing it and hit my mother over the head. My mother falls to the ground. My uncle stands up and yells, "Doughty!" And as my mother laid there motionless, I thought she was dead.
Hmm.
So that one incident impacted me my whole life. And for half my life, I didn't realize the challenges that it presented. I was going through the motions, just going through life like I was living in a fog behind a veil. And not until I took action did I begin to realize the impact of witnessing domestic violence. So that's where it kind of started.
Sure. Well, and
I
I
don't know if
know
I
as
should
I
keep
work on
going or go ahead.
well,
Go
as
ahead.
I as I have worked with people, I can see a lot of times that it doesn't really just start there. You know, it started even before you were even conscious of it. And it is kind of
Right.
building up. And then all of a sudden, consciously, that is where it starts for you, if that makes sense. And then,
Yes,
um, so at that point, I would imagine you were living with a lot of fear.
I was because well after my during that time, yeah, there were many other incidences that my sisters told me about. A couple others that I remember, but most of the other ones my sisters told me about. And yeah, it makes you live behind the veil. It was really impactful and really didn't understand it until I took that action to see a therapist. So, from the age of 12 to 18, after my
Yeah.
parents got divorced, you would think things would get better, but I was actually unsupervised from the age of 12 to 18.
Yeah.
My parents weren't around. My mother was living with a priest, a singing and dancing priest in the Pittsburgh area,
Yes.
and my father wasn't around. And my sisters at this time were a senior. My older sister was a senior in high school, so we had free reins. My sisters were having parties and having fun. Right, they were in high school. Most
Right.
most high school kids would do that. And I was 11 years old at this time, so I was in from 12 to 18. If I wouldn't have played football during that time, I played from third to 12th grade. If I wouldn't have played football, I know I wouldn't be here today because it saved my life. It gave me an outlet. It gave me a place where football was kind of my family, where I could express my thoughts and my feelings. So that it helped me develop
Absolutely.
character and some other valuable life skills that helped throughout my life.
Absolutely. I think that a lot about
Yes.
sports. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking when we survive trauma and abuse, a lot of times, and not just survive, but then when we thrive, a lot of times we can look back and find little anchors in our lives that help us bring us back to that part where we say, oh, this is what normal or safe or love feels like, and this is the difference over
Yes.
here is something else. And you were talking about sports, and I think, well, we if we really want to play sports, you have to usually have a good grade point average, which means then you kind of, you have to do decent in
Yeah.
school or they won't let you play. And so there's some discipline that's being taught there. Sometimes it's in school, like in the classroom, and other times it's out on the field, right? Like you have to do specific things to be good enough to play. And so yes, let's
Yes.
say a shout out to team sports and keeping them alive and how that can be a guide to
Yeah.
young people.
Yeah. Very much so. And sports. A couple things. One, I read once that 99% of Fortune 500 CEOs played sports at one time in their life. That's
Yeah.
quite an amazing statistic. But it's not about just playing sports. It's
No.
about being involved. It
Yes.
doesn't matter if it's a community, volunteer work or community work or in a band or
For
in the
sure.
debate club or the drama club. It doesn't matter. It's about being involved so you can build relationships, build character, build self-esteem. That's what it's about, getting involved. And if I would have not played football and self-isolated, as I said, I probably wouldn't be here.
For
So
sure.
there's a lot of value in taking action and being involved in anything, not just sports
Yes.
in particular, but yes.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, you have to learn
Yeah,
communication and respect, and usually you have at least one person that's trying to lift you up and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you showed up today." Or if you don't show up, they reach out and say, "Where are you? What happened?" Because if you're not getting that from home, then you have to have some sort of community that's doing that with you, for you. So that's
that's
awesome.
right. Yeah, that's where you learn the leadership, right? The person
Yeah.
that you spoke of there, maybe the person that he was speaking to, he or she, now he becomes or she becomes the leader. So
Yes.
again, it's those are the types of valuable life skills that you learn by being involved.
Yes. I love
Yes.
that. And so did you have anyone, another family member that was close by that kind of was also like an anchor for you, that, maybe a rock for you?
Yeah, very much so. And it was my grandmother, my father's mother, actually. And she lived in this 5-story apartment building where it overlooked the park where we all hung out. And I would often see her looking out of her sun porch window, and she would know when you got out of someone's car, who you were hanging out with. She could see and smell things from a half mile away. She had a nose like a golden retriever, but yeah, she
So
kept me
she held you a
straight.
little
I was
accountable.
Yeah, and this was during my high school years, with those 12 to 18 when I was on my own. She
Mhm.
happened to live in the town again where we hung out, so I ate a lot of meals there.
Yes,
She fed me a lot and spent a lot of time, but yeah, she was my anchor. It's where I learned right and wrong, and where I felt safe, felt
for sure.
normal. Where yeah, it's where I learned my manners.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
she
we
taught
have
me a
that in
lot.
common. My parents
Good.
got divorced when I was 12, and I was unsupervised
Hmm.
a lot. And
Wow.
My Nana and Papa lived in the town that I grew up in. It was extremely small, about 300 to 400 people. And I was very sheltered. And, I always knew that Nana and Papa had food in their fridge and that I was welcome there all the time. And as I got older, I knew it was a gauge if I didn't want to go over there to see them because if I was maybe not doing very well in school or I was, sleeping in too much and not, skipping school or something like that. I did do that every once in a while. And Nana would come
Oh,
in and she would she would say, "Roxanne, get up. You're missing school." Or, "Why haven't you visited me? There's something going on. What's going on?" And so I'm grateful to have people like that in my life. And so um yeah, I want to come back to that later about how you feel about being that person, what that
mm,
means for you too, that you were taught that. So anyway, we'll come back to that. Okay, so you're in high school, you're playing football, and you have come from a very abusive situation. I would say that's pretty abusive, but I do want to talk about this
yes.
because you and I had talked about it before. I think when you are in an abusive situation, whether you're a small child or you're in a relationship with someone, you don't really know how bad it is until you get out of it. And then you realize, wow, that's not normal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think because of my earlier experience with domestic violence and abuse, I was actually a little more, I think, receptive, unfortunately, of and a little more delay of seeing it, like you said, not until you get out. But I maybe saw it a little bit before that, and what I'm referencing that maybe you know, but your audience doesn't, is my second marriage became emotionally abusive, and I didn't, as I was saying, I didn't recognize it right at first. And it didn't dawn on me until certain things occurred and until I stepped back a little bit,
Yes.
started to get more help and taking action, and stepping back and saying, oh my goodness, I am in a situation where I don't have a voice. I'm being emotionally abused. I'm being
Hmm.
controlled. I'm being controlled when I can eat, what I can say, what I can't say. And I didn't realize it until I backed out a little bit and took a step back and said, what is going on here? And you're right. There are so many times, and it's just not about abuse. There's so many times that we just, as I was saying, is before going through life, just as like this, whatever's next, taking that next step, whatever's next, and
Hmm.
not actually stepping out of it, taking a step back, looking at where you are and what is actually going on.
Hmm.
And I don't understand why it's so hard to do. Right? I mean, you're in these situations. As an example, I bought a car just 2 days back,
Hmm.
right? You get in that situation when you're buying a car, and they're good at it, right? These salesmen and these general managers are good. So you kind of just, yeah, and it's similar, right? It's similar to when you're in that abuse and you need to step back and take a look and figure out what's going on. And what I was saying is, why does it take us sometimes getting slapped across the head or having to take that step back before we realize what is actually going on because we're living it? Why is it that it
Hmm.
takes so much time to realize it? I don't know if
Yeah.
there's an answer to that. I think
Well,
everyone's different,
for sure.
obviously, but go ahead.
Well, what I was going to
You
say
have
is,
more experience in that than
no.
myself.
Well, what I was going to say is, so the subconscious mind is formed by the age of 8. And the subconscious mind is 95% of every single decision we make. Like you have been programmed in a specific way from the time that you're like a baby, right? Like if I do this, then I get this in return. If I do this, then I get this in return. It happens really fast. Like we learn that so fast. and then we're programmed by the age of
Yes.
8. And
Okay.
so when you live in a home where your opinion doesn't matter, or you're not being seen or heard or listened to, you know, you try to find different ways, whether it's like being a chameleon and going along with what somebody's saying, or you act out on totally on the other end of that, you know. So there's specific things that we do to kind of cope through all that, and we don't even know we're doing it. We don't even know
Yeah.
we're in this pattern because it's happened way before we even were even um, conscious of our actions.
Yeah.
It doesn't help that a lot of times we are acting in fear, right?
Oh
And the
yeah.
absolute worst frequency of vibration that we can subscribe to is shame. And I think when we have and
Yes.
it's true, and when we have someone who is abusive in our lives, and we've put up with it for a long time, we feel ashamed. We feel shame in our life because we're like, I know I deserve better than this. How do I tell people that I've been
Yeah.
allowing someone to treat me this way? You know, those are the things that kind of come up. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that makes sense. What struck me was the shame. I read a book, Power versus Force. I
Mhm.
don't forget the author at this time, but it was a great book, and they put together a map of consciousness, and the lowest level of consciousness and energy is fear.
Yeah.
And the highest level is enlightenment, God and Jesus. And
Yeah.
it's funny when you look at those different levels and the different energy that goes along with it. It's so clear that
Yes.
shame, is fear and so forth, and love is the higher consciousness.
Yep.
Those are the things that book as well. There were two books that helped me, and we'll talk about one of them. But yeah, that book helped me understand the impact of our behavior, and
Yeah.
understanding that our consciousness influences our thoughts and our behavior.
When did you read that? How did it get into your hands?
I don't, it's funny, right? When how you find certain things that help. I don't know how I came across the book. I must have been reading something that referenced that book.
Mhm.
But yeah, it must have been 15 years ago that I
Okay.
read that book. But it gave me so much awareness
Mhm.
and so much understanding about our consciousness and the
Yeah.
different levels of energy, and that we can attract whatever we want. You're much aware of the law of attraction,
Yeah.
and it's so true that everything has an energy, and you can attract that energy.
Yeah, and it all takes practice. It just and so when people will start to do it and then they're
Consistency. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, they'll start and then they're like, "Well, it just didn't show up." I'm like, "Well, I can't get off the couch and run a marathon. I have to practice, you know?" So it's like it's the same thing.
yeah.
So, yeah.
That's the truth. Happens in
Oh,
God's time, as they say. I've been praying for this. I've been praying for this all my
right.
life, and it came at 64 years old.
Wow. Yeah. No. And
Yeah,
I was like, I want to have, this was maybe like 5 or 6 or 10 years ago. I'm like, I want to have a podcast, but I thought, what am I even going to talk about? You know, I'm like, I could sit and talk to people all day long. And then specific things happened in my life. And I'm like, well, here it is. This is what we're doing.
yeah,
And but I think, that for me, that is like, your intuition and this higher knowing that there's something else out there for you. and
yes,
and it's our job to tune into that frequency and try to line up with it. And when you feel the ick and when you feel the like those kinds of feelings, you are not lining up with it at all. But we are taught to stuff that, right? Like, not, don't, it's fine, you'll be fine, just keep going, you'll be all right. No,
you'll
don't
be
talk
all
about it.
right.
Yeah. And you're not all right, you're kind of getting numb the whole time. And so
Ye-
um
yeah.
Yeah, so you're in high school, you get out of high school and so at that point are you kind of numb? Are you kind of just going through life like, okay, I'm not really sure how I feel about myself or life?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going through the motions. As an example, in high school, I liked my physics class, so I'll major in physics.
Yeah.
My sister went to California University of Pennsylvania, an education school. I'll go to Cal State too. No
Yeah.
thought, no consultation, just whatever's to be next. So, yeah, I went to college, majored in physics. Don't ask me why or how,
Yeah.
but I had a lot of computer science classes, and that's where I ended up, at least after my college career started. But yeah, I went to college. I went I played rugby my last semester in college, and after college, I played rugby for 12 years after that. When I first got out of school, I worked for Fridays. I was a host for Fridays, and I met a gentleman who played on the rugby team. And
Nice.
I played for 12 years after that. So that was great. You meet a lot. I mean, you meet a lot of friends, lifetime friends, but rugby and the drugs and alcohol that I was into during those times didn't mix well. They didn't go together well.
Sure.
Well, they did. That was the problem. uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I played rugby for 12 years after that. During that time, I got married and I had two kids. And I was, as I said, drinking and doing drugs and partying and doing all the things you shouldn't be doing when you're married with two kids.
Sure.
But then is when I took action. I
Mhm.
finally said that I need to do something. And I took action and I saw a counselor. And the counselor, when I started seeing her, it was apparent that I didn't remember much. So she
About your
contacted my
childhood?
mother and, yeah, about my childhood.
Okay.
Yeah, it was apparent that I didn't remember anything from, like I said, from 5 years old. I mean, I remember things, but yeah, I don't remember much,
Mhm.
and I was doing the wrong things. So she had wrote a letter to my mother saying, "Why don't you write Paul a letter and explain to him what was going on?" So my mother wrote me a letter and provided me some context of when things happened because I had no idea of when it
Sure.
started and when it ended and why it happened and so forth. So that, along with the counseling, things started to get a little clearer. My mother had given me a book, 101 Ways to Transform Your Life by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And she had given me that book. It was a cassette tape a couple years earlier. Like I said,
Right.
it's amazing how these things happen, right?
Yep.
And it was sat on the shelf for somewhere for a couple years, and then I started listening to that tape, and that tape, again, it was very similar to Power versus Force, where it's giving you more, that there's much more than yourself and much more than what you can see, and about the energy and the spirituality. And so that book as well started to give me, and things started to happen. I started to become a little clearer. And as I didn't mention, but I was in IT for 30 some years. So I was assigned, I lived in Pittsburgh. I had just told my wife and kids that I was leaving, that I was getting a divorce and I was leaving. Probably the hardest thing I ever had to do. But then I drove to Cleveland to the project site. And when I got to the project site, the project was right next to a church. And I never used to go to church, but I went over to church at lunch hour a few times, and I ended up writing the priest a letter, and meeting with him. And the letter kind of explained that I was going through all this change, things are happening. I just got divorced, or I was getting a divorce, just left my kids. And the result of that meeting, he said, just pray, just pray. What is it that you want from me right now, oh Lord?
Mm.
Okay. So I don't know, a month or two later, I'm sitting at a bar, the Penn Monroe in Monroeville, and I'm sitting there drowning my sorrows. And it's busy. There's a lot of people around. There's a DJ playing behind me. And I look at this bottle of vodka that was behind the bar and I say, "What is it that you want from me right now, oh Lord?" And as I said that, the DJ said, "Yes, that is God." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew he was talking to me. And then another time, I was in this busy area. It was a coastal area, it was a public area, and I was looking for a place to pray. Again, I don't always look for a place to pray, but this day I wanted to pray for some reason. So I drove. I said, "Oh, I'll just drive along the coastal road and see if I can find a place to pray." And I drove down the road and I came around this corner and there was this big opening. And so I pulled my car down and I come walking up. And I walk up and I see this circular formation in the ground. It's outlined with rocks and it was a labyrinth. Labyrinths have been used for thousands of years as a spiritual tool for meditation and reflection, I found
Hmm.
out. And there's one way in and one way out to a labyrinth. And so I start walking through this labyrinth. And when I get to the center of the labyrinth, there's this little pile of rocks. And sticking out of this pile of rocks is a crucifix of Jesus. And this site overlooks a lighthouse. And this lighthouse flashes 143, 143 for "I love you." So somebody was trying to tell me something, and on September 12th, 1998, I quit drinking. It has been 26 years since I've had a drink. So
Nice.
that is
Good job.
kind of what opened up everything, and everything kind of came from that one. I mean, it didn't bring me, it wasn't the be all, right? But
Sure.
it took me out of that place where I was and brought me to a bigger, higher level of consciousness, quite
Yeah.
honestly. And I have stayed near that highest level of consciousness. But as you say, we drop down and we have bad days and we have to bring
Hmm.
ourselves back up. But yeah, so that was kind of my spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing
Well,
that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I thank you. I'm always curious to know how people, that maybe weren't subscribing to that belief system before get to that part. And I think you that's a wonderful experience that you're sharing, that it wasn't just like, a light came down and you saw this huge miracle and it
Yes.
was like you had to apply some of the energy there. You went in, you talked to someone, you said, how could I do this? And then you practiced it, right? You were like, I'm going
Yeah.
to pray, I'm going to ask. Asking is huge. You have to ask because, it isn't a forced thing. God and higher power, that is not something they're like, you have to. It is a choice.
Yeah.
It's something where you have to say, hey, I'm out here. Could you help me, please? Because I don't know how to do this. And then I feel like, I mean, for me at least, it happens if I ask, but I also have to be willing to listen and listen to and look for and receive the messages that are coming in, not just it has to come in a specific way for me. I have to be open and say, okay, if you're going to talk
Yeah.
to me or you're going to send me a message, I have to be open to what that looks like and receive it. And a lot of times it's other people that come into our lives, or like that. You'll
Yeah.
have one little thing and you're like, whoa, is anybody else seeing
Yes.
this? Or was this for me? Because I
Yeah.
think it was for me, so
Yeah.
it's really neat.
It's true. You have to be receptive first, because I was so closed up. I was like in a bubble, keeping everything in and keeping everything out, and not until I dropped that barrier and kind of broke out of it, did I was I able to receive as you and be receptive of those things. So
Yeah.
yeah, most definitely.
And I say it all the time, like, we're not supposed to be here and do all of this on our own and by ourselves. We have each other for a reason. And not only that, but we're supposed to be co-collaborating with source. That's my thing, right? Like, you have to co-collaborate with something higher than you and that loves you. Like, that's what I feel like God is. And um,
It
so,
is
but a lot of times we deny ourselves that because either we just kind of spiral down a lot of times and we get into that dark fear and shame and guilt and all that kind of stuff. And we forget
fear.
that when we're isolating ourselves, that's the worst thing that we can do, really. We really need to be reaching out and say, I need help. Something's something's wrong. Something's not right.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part, right? Is taking that first step
Hmm.
out of our comfort zone, because nobody wants to take that first step. Nobody wants to say I have a problem. The A lot of people, they don't want to be perceived as having a problem. So it's another reason why people hide it and keep it in, is because they don't want to be like, oh, Paul has a problem. We all do,
We all
right?
do. Yeah.
So we all
We all
do.
do. I have this sign right here. It says, "Relax, we're all crazy. It's not a competition." Like, we all we all have our stuff. We all need
Yes.
healing. We all are, we all have stuff we need to a problem. We all have a problem, like you said. And
Yeah.
that's why we're here, is to find specific people that work for us to, like, listen to us or give us advice or some kind of healing. Like, oh my gosh, I am so deep diving into so many different types of healing and I love it so much because there are multiple aspects to us, right? We're like the spiritual being and also the physical body, and we can't just do one without healing the other part. And so that's why I love all different types of healing. So anyway, I get really excited about it. And then when you talk
Yeah.
about
Good.
physics, I could talk about like quantum physics and all of that kind of stuff for a really long time because I absolutely think it's fascinating. Um, and kind of can geek out about it and love it. So I actually think that you were on the right path and you just didn't know
That's probably true. Yeah,
it. Yeah.
because I was clouding my everything
Hmm.
with substances
Sure.
that doesn't allow you to think clearly and get past the fear and the doubt and
Yeah,
all those
because
negative thoughts.
the higher self, right? Like the highest Paul knew that in order for you to actually get to this part, you would have to heal the stuff that wasn't even, like, you couldn't even remember because it was there and it was stuffed in your, your cellular memory. Your tissues are remember
Right,
the issues are in the tissues, right? Like, they're remembering the fear of watching that happen to your mother and all the other times that you can't all the way remember. So, okay,
yeah,
so you get this letter from your mom, right?
right, yeah,
And then she sends you the book and you start, and then you have this kind of spiritual awakening, which, like you said, just because it happens doesn't make all the other stuff go away. Like, you have to do the work.
right.
And so you've stopped drinking, and also, like, were there some relationships that you had to, like, revisit or patch up, or like, what happened at that point?
Yeah, there were, yes, obviously, when you're lost and drinking and doing things you shouldn't be, yeah, you hurt a lot of people. So I have gone back, and it's not something that happened all at once either. I have gone back to multiple people and apologized, saying I apologize how I treated you back in high school. It was not right. Or after college, I apologize for how I treated you. I apologize to many people for how I acted,
Hmm.
because you hurt people, and when you become more aware and conscious, you don't like to hurt people. You want to help
No.
people. That's why we're
Right.
here, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that it changed my perspective from hurting to helping
Yes.
a great deal.
Well, and not only that, but you are showing God and the universe that you're taking ownership of your stuff, like the shadow side of yourself that, we don't always
Yes.
really want to look at. You're taking ownership of it, and by doing that, you are actually healing it and
Yes.
generations, and and also you're totally shifting the vibration that you're on. You're not playing the victim. You're not owning your stuff or blaming it on someone else anymore. So that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Well, I'm proud of you. That's good. Um,
Well, thank you.
yeah. And so what happened next? Tell us what happened next.
Yeah, so I met my second wife, who had three children, and I had two. She moved from Boston to Pittsburgh for a number of years, hated it. She grew up in the beach area, so she didn't care for the Midwest.
Okay.
So we ended up moving back to the Boston area.
Okay.
So I left the two, and in the interim, we had a son. I have three stepkids, two children with my first wife, and another child
Okay.
with my second wife. And
Nice.
I was married for 23 years. And as I mentioned earlier, many of those years, probably more than half, it was emotionally abusive. Um, I later found out that for more than half of my marriage, my ex-wife, was having an affair.
Oh my gosh.
Um, so at the same time, around the time that I found out she was having an affair, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease and Babesia.
Okay. So tell
And
me
I
a little bit
had,
about both of those so that people know, like maybe symptoms or whatever.
yeah, Lyme disease is, you get it from a tick, from a deer tick. I
Mm-hmm.
had it for 4 years before I even knew it. And that's bad because it takes over your body. But the side effects of having Lyme disease are a lot of cognitive issues,
Mm-hmm.
as well as it affects your joints and your muscles. I lost 50% of my hearing because I had a bad tooth and the Lyme ended up living in my head. Um,
Mm.
so I lost 50% of my hearing. I mean, it feels like you were about 90 years old, I imagine, because you couldn't move. In my body, everything I did hurt.
Yeah.
I just remember laying on the ground saying, "Why does everything hurt?" I'm 50 years old at the time or something. So so at the time I was again in a bad marriage. I was coming through Lyme disease, and I was on so I had Lyme disease for 4 or 5 years, and then I was on antibiotics for about 4 years. So different,
Mm-hmm.
taking three or probably two or three different antibiotics at any one time
Yep.
every day for 4 years, and that tore me apart.
Yep.
It tore me apart. It left me suicidal, quite
Mm-hmm.
honestly. I was in a bad state at this point. I was suicidal. I was in a bad marriage. I had Lyme disease. So again, I took action. There were two things that saved my life at this point. I was going to make a joke, but I won't. There was two things that saved my life at this point, and one was TMS therapy. So, at the
Yeah.
point of that I came out of this Lyme disease in a bad marriage, I was depressed. I was suicidal. I stared at walls for days at end. Um, I found TMS therapy, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Great.
And what it is they map your head and they find different parts of your brain. They put your hand like this, and they like put some magnet or like a pecking thing, that magnet on your head, and your hand goes like this. So
Hmm.
they're looking for different areas of your head. The place I went to, the Healing House in Orlando, I had three different places on my head that they tapped. Right
Okay.
here, it was like every 5 seconds, it would go for 10 seconds. Over here, it was like every second and different variations. But I went there and I did this TMS therapy every day for 30 days.
Wow.
And I came out a new man. I was suicidal, walking in, crying, and I came out a new man, wanting to live. At this
That's
point, I
amazing.
still was. I was, yeah. It was amazing. Again, came across my desk, right? TMS therapy. My sister
S-
was like, "Yeah, I have a friend in Florida. Her son went to school with this woman who owns this place, and maybe we should contact her."
That's
Well, she
awesome.
saved my life.
So at that
And then
point,
the other thing, yeah,
were
yeah,
you
go ahead.
testing for Lyme still, or was it like gone at that point?
I was no longer testing with it because I wasn't seeing a doctor any longer at that point. Because back then, I don't know if it is any different now, but Lyme disease wasn't covered by any
I see.
insurance. So
Okay.
when you went to see Lyme doctors, it was all out of
I
pocket.
know.
So
Yeah.
when I just quit. I just said I'm done with the diet, with the antibiotics, and I'm done with it.
Yeah.
And I took a different approach. I prayed. And what I did is I prayed. I prayed. What I said was, "It is my intention that Dr. Jesus and I will heal myself of this disease." And as I said that, I took a breath in and I went from my feet all the way to my head, and then I would exhale. So I would do that all the time. And I no longer have Lyme. I take CBD to kind of calm it down, and when it helps with the joints and stuff. But yeah,
That's
um, I
amazing.
that was
Yeah. So you
another
were doing
thing
energy
that
work on yourself.
if that's what it's called, you're aware. Yeah.
Yeah.
My sister, I was saying that, and my sister, she has a direct connection to Jesus. It's amazing the things that happened to her. But yeah, it was amazing. Then she had me add the Jesus part of it. So I was just saying, before I was just saying I heal myself of the disease. I didn't use Doctor Jesus, but I added that in, and I maybe that's what did it. I'm not sure, but
Yeah. I've seen a
yeah.
huge difference in my, I think you and I talked about this a little bit, but um, I have a lot of religious trauma because I was in a very, very strict, I was a Mormon. I was in the Mormon church, and there were a lot of parts of that just really messed up my idea of what God and Jesus and, um,
Hmm.
fear and all, like it was all just so enmeshed that I just didn't, it didn't work for me at all. At some point, I had to get away from that. And I think when you have, a religious transition where like you were really deep in a religion and then you go, yeah, this isn't working for me anymore. And you kind of walk away. Some people just walk away and they totally let go and they don't pick up something else that, and I didn't do that. I decided that I knew that there was something else and I just had to wait for it to come to me so that I could figure out what that looked like for me. And I feel like those
Yeah.
that relationship is very personal. It's a personal relationship that I have with God and Jesus and angels and a higher power. Earth is a beautiful place for us that is a gift for us, and there's massive healing that happens because we have this amazing planet that we really are taking for granted, but that's a whole other podcast.
I
But
love
once
that
I,
discussion.
yeah, once I really tuned in to what really worked for me, and it's just massive love that I feel like is there for everyone. And we do have the power, and I do think that Jesus was trying to tell us that we have the ability to heal I mean, obviously, like go back and look at all the stories, and he's healing with his hands. Wow. And so we have that ability. We are
We
children
do.
of the same source energy. And so but a lot of times we don't tap into that, and not only that, but we tap into it maybe with conditions that we don't need to do that. We need to tap into it with love, right? Being open. So I appreciate you telling me all that. It's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
And so you were feeling better.
Yeah.
You're walking out of there a new man after your um TMS therapy, right?
Right.
And then you're like, I'm going to go conquer the world.
Yeah, well, you would think, but you still have to build resilience from there, right? You would think I was
Right.
over the hump.
That's right.
Well, I guess it took me 4 years to get my ex-wife out of the house. I slept on the couch for 4 years. She would not accept anything. She would not leave. She would not move. She would not do anything. So I had to live on the couch for 4 years. And we finally came to an agreement that, we were going to go to court. We were scheduled in court, and we had the meeting before you go in to try to resolve everything, and we did. So we came out of the courthouse resolved. We would be divorced. I would have to refinance the house, and when she got her money, she would leave. Okay, I'm in the middle of refinancing, and I lose my job, and I have to refinance so I could get my ex-wife out of the house. So luckily, I was approved by two different. I was at that time I was approved by two different lenders, and one said, "Well, you that auxiliary that the other addition you have, no, we can't. The auxiliary lot, we can't do anything." And the other one said, "Well, we can't do anything either." So I had two approvals because I wanted to have a backup, and I lost my job, and they both said no. Okay. So I went to my current mortgage guy, and he got me mortgage financed. I sent in my final paycheck. They didn't see that it was my final paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
so I was able to refinance. But my ex-wife was going to be in the house until I refinance. You never know how long that's going to be, right?
Right.
So we left the courthouse that day, and I come home. I went out, and I come home, and the part of the agreement was that we would be together, and we would go through the house, and we would say who would get this, who would get that, and that worked out well. So I walked in, and she was packing up everything. So I said, "Yeah, why are you taking all that?" I said, "You kleptomaniac," and I probably
Yeah.
shouldn't have said that. And so I knew there was a picture of my son playing football that I wanted. So I said, "Well, she's packing everything up. I'm going to go grab that picture." So I went and grabbed the picture, and all of a sudden, she pushes me from behind. And then she pushes me again. And then she knocks me over the couch. And I have this picture in my hand. I'm holding my phone trying to get a picture or a video of this
Sure.
because she's kind of beating my back trying to get this picture. And I just dropped the picture and left and called 911. They came, and she had to leave the house.
Wow.
That's how I got my wife out of the house after 4 years sleeping on the couch. So I would not have been able to get over these things if I wouldn't have experienced all the adversity and the challenges early on in life. They helped me grow. They
Mm-hmm.
gave me the ability to get through Lyme disease, to get through a marriage that was very
Toxic.
brutal.
Yes.
I couldn't think of the right word, but yeah, that's what gave me the ability, that the earlier trials and tribulations of getting through those later life's problems. As an
For sure.
example, I have a friend who, she's ready to retire. Everything's paid for her house. She has all the money she needs. She has no kids. Her parents have passed, and she gets a hangnail, and the world's going to end because because they haven't experienced the problem. So
Sure.
you have to take. There's some value in those that adversity that you come across throughout your life. So and
Absolutely.
as we know, life is not easy. You win by getting back up.
That's right.
That's how you win.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I mean, seriously, I'm listening to your story and I'm like, man, on all different levels, you have really been beaten down and you get back up
Yes.
again. Like, I mean, what I was going to say when you just said that is there's lots of times I've looked at other people and I've thought, man, they just don't have any troubles in the world. That's what it seems like. But we all know that it doesn't actually
Yeah.
work that way. And sometimes those struggles are all up here. People are struggling with stuff that nobody else knows about and it's pulling them down.
Mm.
And, so but there's just all different types of attacks that are coming on us, right? Problems that we have, whether they're physical and health things or financial or relationship or spiritual or thoughts, right? I mean, it's like we're extremely complex. And so I'm listening to you and I'm like, I totally get it's the resilience. I see it
Yes.
because you're getting back up, and not only are you getting back up, but you want to help people and you want to tell them, if I can do it, you can do it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I'm speaking to teenagers to try to help them overcome any of their struggles, not abusive struggles.
Sure.
And I wrote a book for that same reason,
Yeah.
is to try to help people. It's funny in my neighborhood here. That's all I do is try to help people. Just little things, right? It doesn't need to be anything big,
Yeah.
but just helping others makes you feel of value as well.
For sure. Gives you some purpose.
Yeah.
And, you were talking about earlier, and I knew I was going to come back to it because, we were talking about the anchor of your grandmother or probably a coach or other people. And now you get to pay that forward, right? Like it's come to you and now it's your turn to do that for other people, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. And I guess that's where I was alluding to earlier. Is there's value in the struggles that we overcome, and the value is being able to share those experiences with others. As I had mentioned when we first started, if somebody's going through something similar, any of the experiences that I have covered, maybe they may take action and take that first step out of their comfort zone to for self discovery. Because if I wouldn't have taken that first step, I know I wouldn't be here. There was many opportunities I had to not be here. But each
Sure.
time I took the step to try to help myself, which then build that resilience that ultimately helped me towards the end of my marriage.
Sure.
Is Yeah.
Whenever someone comes in and they're like really struggling with something, I always say things like, okay, so that's a lot, like what you told me is a lot. And how can we flip that and say, I'm not going to excuse the behavior of, someone doing something really awful to me or whatever the experience was, but what did it teach you about yourself so that you can say, wow, I didn't know that that was in me to be so strong and so brave to take the action that I have to do next. And thank you for coming into my life and teaching me that, because I mean, I have this opportunity now to be this shinier, brighter, stronger, braver self now. So thank you. So when you're helping someone, maybe what is their first step that you tell them? Like what would you advise someone? I'm sure you have a little go-to that you say, "Okay, so this is what you got to do," you know? What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing that I try to communicate is speaking up, and because I didn't speak up. The abuse happened for 11 or 8 years, and never told anybody. And when we did tell somebody, they didn't believe us.
Sure.
No, that couldn't happen. That couldn't happen.
Like you said, so sometimes when we speak up, maybe nobody's listening or they don't believe us or they don't really understand the depth of how bad it is. And then speak up again. Talk to somebody else then, So
Yeah, that's right. And I mentioned that in my talk is reach out to more than one person, right? Because different people have different perspectives. When you're talking to somebody, just a teacher or an adult, you have that connection. You can feel that. Yeah, I think I can trust this person. When you have that type of connection, maybe that is somebody that you can trust, and you can take that first step and start to open up. Another thing is you don't have to open up and regurgitate everything, right? I didn't. You just give them bits and pieces, little pieces, and see how they react, and see if it is someone that you can trust. So,
sure.
you're right. Look to talk to more than one person, because different people have different perspectives.
When you were talking about the resilience part and you kept talking about getting back up, um, I was thinking, no one's got you like you've got you. And if you're not going to show up for yourself, then how can we expect someone else to show up for us? And so, but I see that, I hear that in your story. Somehow innately you knew that you're like, I have to pick myself up and I have to, be brave and strong and do the next step.
I had mentioned earlier, I pray all the time. And when I was growing up, I always thought something was going to happen to me at 35 years old. I always thought something was going to happen when I was growing up. Honestly, I thought I was going to die, because I was in a
Interesting.
bad spot. But 35 is when I took action. So, and that's when I went to counseling. But during all of that time, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and I believed. I believed that there was something more for me, and I knew. And when I started, again coming out of that fog, it wasn't a thinking. It was a knowing. It was a knowing.
Mm,
And when you have that knowing
yeah.
that how you want to proceed, and that you want to proceed, that's what kept me going. It kept me
Yeah.
going, that I knew that there was something greater for me. It would have been so easy to quit.
Yeah.
Nobody would have said anything, probably. Nobody would even have noticed, but it would have been easy to quit. But I had that in me, inside me, that I didn't even know at the time, that kept
Yeah.
me driving, going forward.
Yeah.
That's what it
Me
was.
me too. Me
Yeah.
too. And
We
I
got some
didn't know either.
similarities.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people who are trying to hear it, it's like if you are listening and you're receiving the messages, right? You can have the knowing that there is more. There's more for you, and it's because you're tapping into that higher frequency of more, right? This this limitless energy that we just can't even understand because that's what God is, just way, way, way more than we understand. And so when you're tapping into it, then
Yes.
we can feel it, we can know it, and it's available to us too. And so it's up to us. Just because you believe it doesn't mean it just shows up on your doorstep like an Amazon package. You have to take steps. Wouldn't that be
Yes.
amazing? That
True.
would be awesome. um
Yeah, that comes in a couple hours, doesn't it?
yeah. Today between 4 and 7, that would be great. um so
There's
no.
three things that I try to communicate, to the teenagers and in my speech to all parties. And that is speaking up and asking for help. We've been talking a lot about that today, right? There's in speaking up and asking for help is it's a strength, not a weakness. And so many times we feel that asking for help is a sign of weakness, but it's not. It's a sign of strength. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing is we talked about as well is taking action, right? Taking that first step, taking action, whatever it may be, and getting involved in volunteer work, community work, the drama club, all those things that we talked about, and getting involved. And embracing self-discovery is really where I was able to get out of my funk and in moving forward is embracing self-discovery and taking that first step out of my comfort zone. And when
I
you
love it.
do those three things, speak up, get involved, and embrace self-discovery, you're taking action. And we talked about that a lot today. And when you take action, you build resilience. And resilience is not only the ability to bounce back after some traumatic event, but it's also about growing and learning
Mm-hmm.
in those challenges and that the adversities that we face. And as I said, that's what saved me.
Yeah. That was great. Yeah. Well,
Um,
that was beautifully put. And you, when every time you get up, you're stronger, and I love that.
yeah.
And so I really love your sign. You have to move just a little bit so everybody can see it behind you.
Oh,
Resilience
yeah.
is my superpower. And it really
I
is.
was.
I mean, especially after hearing your story, and I know that there's more there that you didn't even share, but um, you know, thank you. Thank you for getting
Mm,
up, when you got knocked
sure.
down.
Yeah. Get down. Get knocked down 7 times. Get up 8. It's an old Chinese proverb, but
That's
yeah. I
amazing.
mean, that's how we win.
That's how
And
we win.
the sports did help me in that respect,
Yep.
right? Getting knocked down and getting pushed around and getting back up. That's what it's all about. That's how we win. You
That's
don't
right.
you have never failed until you quit.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, so how can we find you? Where are you on
Yes.
social media? What are we doing? What are we looking for here?
Yeah, I think the best place would be pdspeaks.com because that'll point you to all the other social media sites and
Okay.
yeah, it'll tell you more about my story. pdspeaks.com.
I love it. Thank you,
Yeah.
Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooks. Thanks for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story and hopefully have the opportunity to help others and help someone. And that's why we're here.
That's awesome. I love it. All right. We'll see you soon.
All right, Brooks, you take care. Thank you.
Mhm. Bye.
Bye. Good day.